Good morning. I'm Dr. Kathy Amity, and we're here at Family Perspectives Day, where we help families to see the presence of God in everything we do. We just finished praying about God's seeds and growth, and we talked about a sequoia tree. Ministering to families can often be like planting sequoia trees. We plant the seeds, but we may never see the fulfillment of our ministry, of what gifts that is to the family. But our role is not to worry about that. All we are supposed to do is be planting the seeds. We also are looking at a little clip, or it makes me think of that little clip from the old movie Parenthood. Steve Martin and his wife are talking about family life, and the grandma walks in, and she starts talking about merry-go-round and riding the merry-go-round, and how she didn't really like riding the merry-go-round. She liked the roller coaster because it went up and down and up and down, and she thought that was exciting. And that she makes the analogy to that as family life. What we would like to invite you to think about, and what we hope that Family Catechesis does, integrating Family Catechesis, is to help families see God is present. God is present in the ride of life, in the ups and downs, as well as the times that we're just going around that might just be business as usual, but also in the times when we feel like we're going uphill all the time, or sometimes we're just going downhill for a rapid period of time. God is present in all of our family life. That's the hope that Family Catechesis is an encouragement to see God not aside from our family life, not see our faith as alongside our family life, but integrated right into the middle of our family life, and God's presence in the Holy Spirit right there with us in the ups and downs of being a family. And sometimes that isn't always easy to recognize, and that's one of the things that we hope that Family Perspectives does, is help us to encourage families to see that it's in their daily lives that they're going to find God's presence, and to just appreciate that journey. We were sharing earlier, it's like sometimes it seems like the days are long, but the years are short. It goes very fast. Those of you who have raised children would probably agree with that. And to recognize that if we're in a journey with a supportive family and a supportive community, sometimes that literally can make all the difference. And that we're more often likely to see God in daily life and in each other if we have that lens of a family perspective, at God's presence in the everyday. And so today we'd like to just think about the purpose of the day. But I'd like to begin by saying there is no magic wand. Because if there is, I would give it to you, or I would write a book about it. I would give that to you. I wish there was a magic wand. But one of the things that we would say is central and essential is that the church is intergenerational. In the 20th century, the approach to Christian ministry has often been dominated by an age-specific mentality. And we have forgotten in some ways that our core is an intergenerational identity, and that we actually began to believe that sort of bringing everybody together, bringing families together of all members of the family, that was kind of optional. And we completely separated age groups, especially for religious education. And that in doing that, we've actually really, in some ways, the body of Christ is divided in its core identity. And in some ways, we've compromised that. So the new research that we have on how faith is being passed on is telling us a little different story. It's telling us that faith formation and how faith is passed on, it is intergenerational. It's with all generations coming together. It's family-centered, it's hopeful, and it's rooted in that kind of unity. There still is always, and there always will be, a place for age-specific ministry, but there's also a strong need to build bridges between the generations. It's been described as kind of a one-eared Mickey. If you can picture a little Mickey Mouse with two ears, if you think of that center circle, that bigger circle, that's the whole church. And in some ways, we've taken things like religious education, and we've put them as like a one ear over here. not the faith formation was not drawing our young people into the church. It was making a separate community out here, and sometimes a community with less resources and that was less effective. And so what we're talking about with Family Perspectives is bringing those age-specific ministries into the center of the church and our faith formation. One of the things that's also affected us has been our own history. Our own history of religious education has been very tied to Catholic education. And I have a little analogy that this shows you what kind of a church geek I am. Is my husband and I were having a talk about cars, and this is what he was trying to tell me what car we should buy, and this is where my mind went. I started thinking, he was telling me about the different cars we might be able to buy, and I started thinking, I said, well, if you think of like Catholic education, in some ways that's sort of like the Cadillac. That's sort of like, the ultimate way we can use our resources, and we have used our resources since the 1800s when families immigrated into this country and couldn't maybe speak the language. We brought them into schools and we catechized them through the schools. And it has been, Catholic education has been a wonderful gift it's been a wonderful gift to our church and to our world. I myself have a background in Catholic education, and I see the value of it. But I recognize too that it had some advantages. We saw our children 5 days a week. We had trained teachers, people that knew how to impart knowledge and values. We had outcome expectations. There was a sense of accountability. There was parent investments. Parents were choosing it. Often integrated into that would be sacramental preparation and also sacramental celebration, Mass, reconciliation. And so it was a good option for faith formation, and it still is a good option for faith formation. So this is the car that we were looking to replace. This is our Avalon. We really loved our Avalon car, and I use this as my analogy for CCD, or religious education, that one-eared Mickey over here. Our Avalon, I have to tell you, I've always given this talk as saying my husband drove this car to work today. My cousin did not drive this car to work today because our Avalon went to Rawhide. Do you know what Rawhide is? It's like the hospice for cars. It's where you go to die and have your parts taken out. And we gave it to Rawhide, and it had 358,000 miles on it. It had driven hundreds of carpools. It had taken our children learned to drive in that car, and that car was great. My husband loved it because he said every day he drove it, he didn't have to make a car payment. So he was going to take that baby as far as he could. But you know what we came to know about the Avalon? It couldn't take us on the long haul. It could take my husband back and forth to work, but we wouldn't even take it up north. We certainly wouldn't take it down to Florida to go see Grandpa down in Florida. It couldn't make the long haul. And in some ways, that religious ed model, that CCD model, it did serve us well at a time when 80 to 90% of our Catholic children were in Catholic schools. The statistic now is that 80 to 90% of our children are not in Catholic schools. 80 to 90% of them are in a religious education program, if they're in a religious education program. Because another statistic that we have from CARA is that 68% of Catholic parents, 68% of parents who say I'm Catholic do not have their children in a Catholic school or any kind of faith formation. Does that startle you? It should. I think it should startle us that we're not seeing 32% of our children. And so all the issues that were strong in the Catholic education model, we don't have them. We don't always have trained teachers. We simply don't see our children enough time to catechize them as we would like to catechize them. And so we don't have that accountability. And the crisis of our time is time. People have a crisis with their schedules. If you ask anyone, how are you? How often do people say, busy? I thought that would just be when I had children, and I had this crazy notion that you actually launched them and they went somewhere. They went somewhere, they went to college, but they come back with more people. They come back with husbands and wives and children, and now you have more people that you love and you want to spend time with. And they all have activities that you want to go to. And so everyone has this sense of busyness. So what I think we've kind of come to is this is what we were going to buy when we talked about buying a new car. Turned out we actually couldn't afford it. I worked for the church, but that was a good idea my husband had. He said, let's get a crossover. And of course, not knowing what cars were, I said, I don't know what that is. And he said, well, crossover, it kind of takes the best of a lot of different cars, kind of like more the size of a sedan, but has a little more room for carrying things like an SUV, and it kind of like takes a lot of things we're looking for, Kathy, and I think it's going to work for us. So that was great. And then we found out how much it cost, and now we're driving a sedan because that was cheaper. However, it was a great learning experience for me to be able to say, that's the issue. The issue is not that what we had wasn't good. The issue is the times have changed. And so one of the things that we realize is that one size doesn't fit all. But we have learned that notion of intergenerationality, the notion of if families coming together in the church community, and that we together pass on the faith as partners with families, with parents and parish, that we know from the research is more likely to be effective. One of the things that I found very interesting, I hadn't realized this. I recently read a book called Let's Kill Sunday School, which is kind of a provocative title. But the point of it was that Sunday school was originally came out of like a Dickinsonian England, where children didn't go to religious education. They didn't go to even religious schools. They were catechized through the family. And so it was only sort of orphan children that were street urchins, that they kind of brought in and said, we need to teach them something. It was meant to be sort of a pickup, let's pick up the children that aren't getting what they should be getting in their families. And in some ways, that's sort of what our CCD model was. And but it's become the center. And so we have come to believe that this adopting a family perspective is a wonderful starting point for where we are in our life today. And so we're going to look today at why we would have that perspective of family, of intergenerationality, of bringing families together into our church life, and look at that and say, how can we infuse that? How can we create things in our parishes? How can we adapt to what we're doing in ways that draws more of the family in, so that desire we have to pass on our faith to the next generation, to our children, our children's children, and to all the members of our parish, whatever age they are, that we kind of have, so at least we have some ideas of how to do that in the present culture. So we're going to look at what the church tells us about faith and families. We're going to look at what research tells us about faith and families. And then we're going to look at some approaches, some models. Some of you have talked about that, saying you either are doing a family model or you're interested in it. We'll give you some ideas about what to do, because we know now a little more, because some of us have been doing this. I have been doing a catechetical family model for about 28 years now, and I've learned through through my experiences, some things that are going to work better than others. Because I began as I said, a Catholic school teacher. My first degree is early childhood, and I really knew how to teach young children. But then when you got into parish ministry, all of a sudden I had children that were a little older, and I had to learn how to do that. And then when we came into family catechesis, now we had all generations together. We had moms and dads and children and teens. And we said, maybe this needs to look a little different. And so that's what we're trying to share. And so many of you said, I came here to network. That was the best thing you could have said, because we're going to learn a lot from each other. I have yet to go to give a talk or a presentation or go consult in a parish that I haven't learned something. I learn from other people, because we're kind of all in this together, learning how do we do this in our present culture in a way that's effective, so that we don't see the exodus of our young people, the exodus of our families. So one thing, as we said, we know one size doesn't fit all, but we're going to try to get a little, as I like to say, this is sort of the view from the balcony. We're going to kind of get a higher view of it, and then we'll drill down into each of your own environments, your own parishes, and see, like, well, what would work here? And maybe we don't have a magic wand, but I think we'll have a more effective strategy in how to approach this important mission of sharing our faith.